Hey guys, I'm Kate. Welcome back to my channel. And I've been working on a short story collaboration project that I'm excited to finally share with y'all. A couple things to know. My collaboration partner is Ara over at Bentley House Minis. She is wonderful and she built all these incredible, amazing miniatures. And I'm gonna link her video down below so that you can go check it out and see like a visual representation of the growth of this story. I'm also gonna link down below where you can read the final version of this short story, The Elbow Brush Bake Off. You'll also be able to see though the outline, the zero draft, the first draft, all of the drafts. I wanted to show y'all what the entire process of writing this looked like and just my general writing process. I get a lot of questions about what a zero draft is, so now I can kind of tangibly show you. But yes, it'll be all down below on the website. Give it a read. Now, I'm saying it was a collaboration project because it wasn't just like Ara built this thing and I wrote a story. We collaborated over months. For example, y'all know I'm terrible at naming things. Ara actually came up with the title with the help of her patrons. I was so glad to not have to do that. Now, this all started months ago, way back in 2020, when Ara sent me an email. We chatted a bit about the kind of idea of a collaboration between two channels that are different but still creative. And she presented me with a few ideas of builds that she'd been wanting to make, and I chose the one you're gonna read. I chose a cook-off competition scene that has gone wrong in some magical way. She also had a really cool one about a ghost story, but like I had just binged a whole lot of MasterChef and I was all in on cooking competition shows. Y'all, this basically ended up being like a writing prompt for me, only way cooler. One, because I tend to think that writing prompts I only use when I'm just stuck a little bit, so I'm like drafting and I don't ever go back to really revise them. But two, because I was gonna get to see the scene that Ara had created. So much cooler. And already the ideas were flowing. Like this coffee is into my mouth. Bad, that was bad. What I'm thinking of doing is I need to type up and complete some brainstorming notes for a short story collaboration of sorts that I'm really excited about. It is the afternoon. Why are you fogging up? So I think I'm gonna do that and then I can send it off. He looks as tired as I do. That's hot. Let's go outside. All right, the first sprint just finished. Let's see. That is 469 words on my outline, which I am counting for Millwordy. This was the best idea. And I gave her the link and typed everything up, so I'm gonna see what she thinks. Send that off. All right. So off of her prompt, I sent her an outline of what I imagine the story would be. Now, I don't often write from outlines. I tend to just enter into the blank page and see what happens. So this ended up being really great practice for me because one of the things that happened along the way was that according to the outline, I had some teams switch places, but in my head, all of the teams would switch. However, on the outline, only two of the teams ended up switching. And this wasn't something that we even realized until Ara had gone to build the scene. And she was like, oh no. But this was where the practice came in. I stuck to the outline. Ara had already made the build. It was up to me to figure out a way that I could make this story work still. And I think I pulled it off. Y'all are gonna have to read and let me know. So with her build as my guide, she had sent the pictures to me. She sent a wonderful video to me showing me like these up close versions of it. It was time for me to write the story. Now, despite my outline, I actually ended up struggling writing this. I only have one failed version of when I attempted it, but there were lots of failed versions. I sat there at the computer, not sure what to do for what felt like forever. Multiple days in a row, I just did not know how I was gonna write this. And again, I had an outline. I had a way to do it, and it just was not coming to me until thus the zero draft emerged. Oh, I think I have the text. I was literally in bed and I texted myself. I was like about to fall asleep and the idea of how to do this thing came to me. So again, idea while still following the outline. It just, anyways, I text myself a lot. about my ideas. At 10:20 p.m., as someone who tries to go to bed at 10, lights hum, crowns snap into focus, squeezes sister's hand, waves while introduced. Already on stage, tiny host steps off, question mark. How do you feel, he asks. Nervous, a little queasy. That's how I feel at the idea of healthy cake. Yuck, yuck. We promise, sister says, patting the container. A little goes a long way. There were some mistypes in there. Okay, I was tired. It was 10:20 p.m. It's so late. Then, 3 minutes later, turn around, ready to cook. Oh wait, one last thing. Y'all won't be cooking at your stations. Zoom in. Panic face. Confusion. I give myself stage directions as it turns out. Switch picked randomly. Blank and blank will switch. I think this is the part that finally clued in. Sister and her look down at this faux sugar / magic. Horror struck. Okay, I think my issue now that I'm reading this back truly is because only 2 teams were gonna switch, and I could not for the life of me figure out why only 2 teams would switch. And each time I tried to write it, it just didn't seem to work. So anyways, I zero drafted it. I literally in one sitting the next morning wrote out 3,000 words and I was in the frickin' zone, okay? There was no stopping me. There was no stopping the story. Now I'm saying zero draft here because parts of it truly are like stream of consciousness. Like I move in and out of prose to brainstorming to just notes to myself. Y'all will see it. Again, link down below. It's crazy and messy, but I got a really great email from Aira. And basically, Aira had watched my channel before and did not know anything about what I meant when I was saying zero draft because it's confusing. It doesn't make sense. And it was a really big vote of, I don't even want to say confidence, but it was really nice to get Aira's email when she read back the zero draft and was like, oh, that's what that means. She said something about like, you know, getting so excited in the outlining phase, and then when the drafting doesn't initially match up everything you had in your head and doesn't match the outlining, it can get really frustrating because it's hard. You always want it to come out perfect the first time. I don't think this has ever changed. I still would love for the story to come out perfect the first time, but it's not going to. And that's why something about calling it a zero draft helps me so much, because it's not really a first draft. It's in between this weird prose brainstorming brain dump thing. The first draft, all prose, descriptions need to be filled in. No names. Let's note that. There are still no names at this point, okay? But now I had a little over 6,000 words. I had multiple different endings, so it was probably closer to about 5,000 or so words if you're not looking at any do-overs, but that's what I mean. So the zero draft was 3,000 words in a medley of things. And then this first draft is finally a little bit closer to what a normal book or a normal short story would look like. It wouldn't be good, but someone could read it and it would make sense. You see what I'm saying? So now we've done the first draft too, and we're on to the second draft. The big difference is here for me now that I look back on it, having completed it, is that there were still scenes that just weren't right, that didn't flow right, that I think I was coming from the typical novel writer version of something and trying to fit in too many details into a short story. The thing about short stories is that, you know, you only have so many words to get your point across. You can't introduce too many characters. And this is something that I struggled with in this short story in particular because it is a cooking competition that goes wrong. And because in my outline, I set it up to have 3 teams. Already have 3 teams of 2. You have the host and then you have these judges. Turns out that's a lot of characters. So the balance of who to name, the naming of the characters ended up being interesting, and you'll see at the second draft I was still trying to name a lot of them and have them serve a bigger purpose than what warranted the actual end product, the end story. If I had more words, like if I was going to do a novella version of this instead of a short story version of this, I would expand on it. Like these are the places I would expand, but because it needed to be short, this is where we were at. You know what I'm saying? Did not realize that at the second draft yet. So what you'll see is that I had left comments to myself on the side of the Google Doc, just kind of questioning logical errors, consistency, continuity issues. What happens is that I'll tend to cover scenes one at a time. And so I have about 5 scenes or so in this short story. And I would go into my writing for that chunk of the short story being like, okay, I know I need to cover this and this. So then when I go later at a different time, I would have repeated myself. That just doesn't flow well. You don't need it. I hate it when I'm reading a story that doesn't. So those are the issues that remain in the second draft. But again, we're getting closer. It ends up being 6,493 words, and I still don't really like the ending. The ending was a tough one for me. You'll remember that in the first draft, I had a lot of different ending options. I tried to choose one for the second draft, and it It just was not quite the punch I wanted. No longer are we Sister 1 and Sister 2. We are Opal and Ruby. By the way, thank you Twitch for helping me name my characters. So in between the second draft, which has some underscores and things like that where I needed to reference back Era's design a bunch, I do that in this third draft, which comes out to 6,233 words. Now, while I changed the ending again, I was still unsure about it. However, at this point, with everything filled in and it more or less just making sense, other than a few things that I needed feedback on, that was basically the sign. I needed feedback. You get to a point where your eyes just cannot do it anymore and you can't always pinpoint what's wrong. That is when the readers come in. And in the feedback, basically there was some confusion about the husbands, the chefs or judges, and the sisters. So basically the characters weren't as clearly defined as I could make them, especially in that opening page where you're initially unsure what's going on. This is how you enter a lot of stories, just period, is you're not sure what's going on. So it takes you a little bit to get to it, and I needed to flesh that out and make that easier for the reader. There was some slight confusion in one particular scene besides the beginning. It takes place at the bar. It's the second to last scene, and so that needed to also be fleshed out. But other than that, they liked the flow, they liked the concept, they actually thought it set up potential for more short stories following these sisters, or a novella or a novel. The ending really got them. They wanted more. And despite the need for fixes, this is always a good sign. The way I went about fixing this for the fourth draft was actually including just a little bit more dialogue at the beginning and better explaining the kind of team emblems that you can see on Era's design. So I hope that cleared it up a little bit, and also I needed to rework that flow. So every time you make an edit for more information, you have to go back and fix the flow. So I did that to the best of my abilities. But what I did was, once I finished the fourth draft, I sent it over to my brother and sister-in-law and they read it. And with the exception of the first 2 pages, it flowed really well. So basically, now that the characters were confusing, a bit about the setting was still confusing because we open with Opal's heart thumping and her nerves, and that's all fine and good, but you need a little bit more of a placement setting. So I have, you know, the lights swinging and the crowd and stuff, but the immediacy of it being a cooking competition show doesn't sink in as quickly as it should. And so that was the biggest change for the 5th and final draft. Now, I'm saying it's the 5th and final draft. Obviously, there were multiple read-throughs of that draft and little changes here and there, but I consider it all one draft, one entity, as there weren't any big changes and it was easier to just work in the same document. That's kind of how I personally gauge it, is if I don't need to make a new file or a new folder for it, then it's more or less the same draft. Whew. Does that angle work? Does this angle work? We'll do this. Hi, Zelda. Oh, baby. And that's it. We're done. You can now read the 5th and final draft on my website, again linked down below. The entire process is linked down below. And if you're curious or nosy like me, you can check out each stage of the writing process, each revision, and kind of note as we get farther along the kind of little changes I made that hopefully make the story clearer and more easy to read. And while this is only a short story, this is a similar process that I follow for my novel writing too. I do multiple drafts on my own until I'm no longer able to figure out exactly what the problem is or pinpoint it. And then, as long as I have the information all filled in and it is comprehensible, I am willing to send it out to beta readers. And I try and do that process a couple of times until it's done. Now, if this was actually a novel that I was posting out somewhere, I would try to have like some form of a cover, but also really the key here is that this isn't edited. It's not professionally edited. I did all the self-editing. You could actually note between documents where like at one place I'd accidentally typed kiss, and then so I had to go and correct it in the next draft and have kill, which is what I meant. There were multiple instances of those as you're reading the early drafts, and hopefully I've caught them all in the 5th and final draft. But the most interesting part to me of this whole thing kind of creatively was actually building off an outline first and then getting to use Era's whole build for the descriptions. Like, that was very cool. I'm notoriously bad at describing things, and I still don't know that I put as many descriptions in as some other people would if they were the ones writing the story. So I think what I'm gonna do, so I'm gonna challenge myself a year from now. I want to revisit this story and maybe change the tone of it, change the angle of it, maybe write from Harvey Ratner's point of view, and try to add more description in. You know, just always looking to improve. But I do want to finish off finally by not only saying thank you so much to Ara for reaching out to me and really helping me to expand my own idea of creativity and how storytelling can be shared, but also thank her for how flexible she was throughout this entire collaboration. I have had a lot of life changes since she asked me to do this. I moved in with my partner, he bought a house, then we moved in here. Yes. My grandma passed away. We had the Texas snowpocalypse, all while COVID is, you know, raging. It has been a lot. And I want to thank Ara again publicly for the extra flexibility. And again, please go check out her video down below. It is linked, or up here. It's linked everywhere. And I, for one, cannot wait to see it. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon with the new video. Bye. I'm also going to link down below. That was dumb. I'm also gonna link down below where you can